In 1963, Stanley Milgram conducted what is now known as the infamous Milgram experiments. In this experiment, Dr. Milgram decided to test whether ordinary people could be influenced into committing atrocities against their fellow man, as was the case with Nazi Germany. As the story goes, subjects were put in charge of electrocution devices that would send a jolt of electricity to another individual hidden behind a curtain, a person pretending to be a part of the experiment. Now, every time the person behind the curtain got a question wrong, the subject was instructed to shock them. And over the course of the experiment, the voltage was set to increase to up to 450 volts. Each time, the subject was urged to continue the experiment, regardless of how they felt, even when they could hear the screams of the other person on the other side. Now, lots of people are familiar with this experiment, and most refer to the baseline result that shows that 65% of these subjects were willing, when instructed, to press on and to send an ever-increasing volt of electricity to a complete stranger. Now, some hold the Milgram experiments up as a shining example of the evil that 65% of the population is capable of when properly influenced. But that's not the end of the story. In a recent podcast interview, Alex Helsam, professor of psychology at Exeter University, who studied Milgram's work, expressed his frustration with that popular version of the story. He notes that when there were several variations, using more than one researcher to give instructions, the visibility of the supposed victim, use of particular wording during the experiments, that percentage went down. And what Milgram actually discovered is that his subjects were willing to make sacrifices they thought were necessary, even when they were uncomfortable, if they believed they were doing it as an overall benefit to society, and in this case, for the good of science. So to that conclusion, Professor Helsam cites this: when we seek to serve the greater good, we must first ask ourselves, what is greater and what is good? And this is the point that I want to make today. How do we decide? How do we connect with our purpose to decide the right thing? My hope is that when this is over, you will consider how you connect with your purpose. So my background is in nonprofit management and philanthropy. And in the nonprofit world, we're all about mission. Mission this and mission that. And what mission-based management teaches us is that no matter what happens within the organization, you're to use the mission as a guide. You make sure that you're in alignment with the principles and the purpose of that organization. It teaches us that an organization's mission is sacred. It's a statement on how they perceive their value and what action that the organization is prepared to take to make sure that objective is reached. I also work with students and professionals where I teach purpose-based management, or more accurately, purpose-directed leadership. And it goes like this. When you are pursuing a goal, you must first identify how this goal, this task, this objective aligns not only with your values, but who you are as a person and the greatest and the highest expression of that self. Articulate that vision, manifest its creation while developing a means to move it out into the world. Purpose, vision, plan, execution. And in my experience, what I've noticed is this. When there's a problem, when something's not working, I find that it's usually because people have gotten stuck somewhere in the process. So we all know that person who's all vision, no plan, no execution. Or the constant list maker who never makes it through to completion. Or what about those folks who are caught solidly in execution? No vision, no plan, just going. Unfortunately, those tend to be folks caught in survival mode, either figuratively or literally. And then there are those middle spaces. So my friend Stacy is a single mom, and she works hard. She's extremely dedicated to her friends and her family. She starts planning her kids' birthday parties months in advance. And there are always these detailed and intricate themes. And she loves going on Pinterest. She had to find new recipes and party decorations. And she remembers doctor's appointments and soccer games and dance classes and parent-teacher meetings. But Stacy hates her job. And she's often exhausted and frustrated at the end of the day, but not sure how to leave. So every day she goes in and she drags herself to work, and she comes home, gives whatever leftover energy she has to her kids, and then has nothing left for herself. She does this week after week after week. Stacy is productive. She is both a planner and an executor. And on the face of it, there's nothing wrong with this. We constantly push for individuals to be productive members of society. People like Stacy are constantly busy. They plan, they execute. They plan, they execute. and they're extremely productive, but they don't feel they have time to create a vision for themselves for what they might actually want. And being stuck in the productivity mindset means that we go round and round in the same place, and in many cases, we can't or are unwilling to step back and literally see the forest from the trees. And then you get people like me, heavily into visioning, heavily into executing, and this has made it possible for me to develop programs and launch projects and create platforms. I'm clear about my mission, and on most days, I will out-execute most of the people around me. I'm effective. I get things done. I make things happen. Now for the downside. I'm so good at being effective that I don't always stop and think if I'm being efficient. And for me, the challenge is to stop and to process before moving on to execution. I see the goal, I see the vision, I act. It also means that while I might love you dearly, there's not a ton of planning going into buying you the perfect gift. My friends and family know that I am notorious for copping out with gift cards. And for a long time, no matter what the occasion, I bought chips and salsa to the party because I didn't know what to bring, I hated cooking, and I usually waited to the last minute. You know who else operates like this? Workaholics. Workaholics will throw themselves into their work to avoid having to deal with any uncomfortable or personal feelings. Now, when I first shared this framework with a friend of mine, she asked, well, how do I know where I am? Simple. Think of every time that you set out to do something that was really important to you, and through your own efforts or lack of efforts, you failed repeatedly in the same way. That'll give you some indication. You know, how we do anything is how we do everything. But on the other hand, think of the time when this was not the case, when you were on fire, when you were the best version of yourself, when you felt completely in alignment with who you were and what you wanted to do in this world. You were likely operating from here. You were operating from your purpose. Whether it be purpose with a little p, like completing a class or a big assignment, or purpose with a big P, like starting a movement or creating something, your life's work. You are manifesting and moving that out into the world. And didn't that feel great? So how did we get here? Where did the disconnect happen? We're all looking for connection. We all want to feel loved and validated and to know that we have value and that we matter. And I find that if you find yourself operating from one of these particular areas, it's likely where you've experienced love or value and acceptance from operating in this way. Your environment validated you for being a visionary, a planner, or an executor, and you learn to get really good at it. In my case, as with many executors, we learn that our value and our ability to execute and to be our value to be effective. We align our ability to be effective with our identity. And when that ability is taken away, we feel our identities are taken away. Our worth is taken away. So earlier this year, I caught a horrible respiratory infection that made it almost impossible to breathe. I couldn't work. I could barely breathe. I could barely sleep. I was completely unable to maintain my effectiveness and in the middle of a transition when I was still trying to prove myself at work and at a new job. Instead of feeling compassion for myself, all I could see was myself as defective. I couldn't produce. I was broken. I was useless. It was as if my illness was cutting off my supply of validation, something I felt I desperately needed. And I knew that something was wrong with this picture. So one of my greatest heroes is my sister Kelly. She's funny and just simply amazing. She would introduce me to all of these really cool stuff in the world, and I'm pretty sure she introduced me to my first TED Talk. So Kelly loved to read, and she could hold a serious debate with any college professor, any political ideologist, even though she never made it past high school. But my sister lived in the intention zone. She had lots of great ideas, lots of great visions. She was amazing at making these articulate plans, but then nothing. About a year ago, Kelly died of kidney failure. And with that, she took all of her brilliance with her. She never executed on any of the grand plans that she had. And in having conversations with her, I knew that this was part of her fear. Kelly was afraid that if she ever truly executed on any of these ideas, it would never live up to the perfect version of it she had in her head. She was already known for being brilliant. She was already valued for her intellect. This was her identity. And yet deep down, she was afraid of being judged, afraid of being seen as less than. Connecting to our purpose means we stop being afraid to do what we know is our highest expression of ourselves. We stop worrying about losing that external validation or that constant worrying that keeps us in our corners, not living up to our potential as human beings, and running ourselves ragged till there is absolutely nothing left to give, or till we're willing to do anything it takes to feel validated, even if it includes causing harm to another person for the greater good. I used to think that building a movement was about getting individuals to sacrifice themselves on behalf of the collective, to hold sacred above all else the mission. But I was wrong. That's how we get Animal Farm. An Orwellian tale where the main characters are duped into trading one dictator for another for the greater good. Powerful movements aren't built by us grabbing some external light, but instead connecting to the light within and bringing that into the collective. I'm part of a community called Starting Block, an organization that works to find change makers throughout the world and connect them to each other because they understand this fact. The world won't be made better by each of us committing blindly to a cause or an organization without first being able to question ourselves. We don't need martyrs, we need liberators, and we need liberated people. My organization, Leaders of the Free World, takes young Black men on international experiences to connect them with their own possibilities, because we know that these experiences will have a way of exposing them to the world and to themselves. Our work is about developing liberated minds that will connect them to their purpose, articulate their vision, and push it out into the world. As the philosopher Howard Thurman once stated, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go and do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. How will you connect to your purpose? Thank you.